Let's start off by telling us a little bit about yourself, Andrew, and where you're from.
Sure. I'm a filmmaker. This is my first film, or my first narrative feature, I should say. My first full-length commercially released film. Um, I was born and raised in Alaska. The town where we shot, Barrow, Alaska, is actually my hometown. Um, a lot of the people, not the main cast members, but a lot of the extras and the smaller roles, they're actually relatives of mine. Um, and Yeah, I've been living in New York for about the past 10 years. I came out here to go to film school, and I've been living and working out here ever since.
I thought the acting was very strong in the film. Uh, how about a little bit about some of the history of some of the leads in the film?
Yeah, well, almost everybody in the film, this is their first time acting, with I think the exception of Ivach's mother. Allison Warden is actually a performer. She's an actress who works in Alaska. Um, but everybody else, it's their first time acting, and we cast non-actors or first-time actors not because I don't like actors, but because there just aren't really any trained actors who are Inuit or Inupiat who come from that kind of a world. And it was very important to me. I mean, it was vital, first of all, that I cast people who are actually from the culture. I've seen too many films where my own culture is being portrayed by people who have no real connection to it, and I wasn't, I wasn't interested in doing that. And then I really wanted to cast people as well who knew the world that they were portraying on film, who knew what it was like to grow up in a village like Barrow, or in a any small Arctic village like that, and what the kids up there are going through right now. And so one of my producers and I went on a casting trip all over the Arctic. We went to places in Arctic Canada like Iqaluit, Iqaluit, Kuujjuaq. Um, we traveled all over Alaska to places like Point Hope, Shishmaref, Nome, Barrow, obviously, and we would do we would hold auditions in these little villages. We'd go to the local store, get on the local radio channel, even get on the local CB networks, and just try to persuade people to come out and try out for the film. Most of the people in these places had never thought of themselves uh, as acting in a movie, so it was sometimes a little difficult to get people to come out. It's also, the culture is a bit it's kind of a shy culture, or it's not a culture where um, uh, calling attention to yourself is not regarded as something that you're supposed to do. So that was some of the challenges, but we did manage to get people to come out, and we talked to them and tried to figure out who's going to be able to do something like this, who is going to have the bravery, I guess, the openness, the ability to get in front of a camera and uh, just kind of open up, not to kind of shrink when they get in front of the camera, but instead to be able to let everybody in and show what's going on. And then, we were able to find a cast barely. Um, there weren't many second options for any of the roles, actually. If any of them turned us down, it's we might not have done the film.
Was this a launching pad for any? Did anybody get more work after this, the actors wise?
Well, there have been some of the actors are interested in maybe doing other things, which is um, a bit of a shift for them. After we finished filming, um, most of the actors basically swore that they would never do it again because it was a lot more work than they were expecting. And filmmaking isn't as glamorous as it gets portrayed. At least, the nuts and bolts of it isn't. It's a lot of hours and a lot of waiting around. And so by the time we finished, people were like, okay, well, that was interesting. I don't need to do that again. But then when we debuted the film at Sundance a little over a year ago, a lot of the cast came out for that, and they had a big change of heart. You know, all the pain kind of faded into their memories, and a lot of them I think would do it again if an opportunity came up, but none of them have committed to, like moving down to LA or trying to pursue it to that degree.
They're waiting for your next film.
Right.
Do we have any questions?
Yeah, I have one.
All right.
Hi,
Hang on.
my
Bring
name's
this.
Clifford.
Hang on.
Hi, Andrew. My name's Clifford. Hi. How'd you get the support of the Sundance group for the film?
Well, that I kind of have a history with the Sundance Film Festival that goes back a few years. I made a short documentary, just a 10-minute film called Nachillarnachturuk Apagalu, which means seal hunting with dad. It was about a father teaching his son how to hunt seals. And I made that back in 2005, or at least that's when it showed at the festival. And that played there. And then in 2008, I had another short film, this time a short narrative called Sikumi, which played at the festival and actually won the festival that year, won the jury prize in short filmmaking. And that is that short Sikumi is actually what this film On the Ice is based on. The two films are very related. And so that experience, being in the festival introduced me to a lot of people at the Institute and kind of opened some doors. And then I wrote the script for On the Ice following that festival in 2008 and submitted it to the Sundance Labs and got accepted. And so went through the Sundance Lab process in 2009. And then shot in 2010. So, and they were a huge help through every part of the process, both artistically, giving feedback on the script and allowing me to workshop the script and being able to talk to people in the industry and other writers and other directors and things like that. But then there were also huge help in getting it made and getting it produced, in introducing me to other people in the industry, producers and financiers and things like that. And then also just having a project that's in the labs it kind of gives it a stamp of approval, and it opens doors for you just in its own right. So that was a huge help.
How about as far as the Kickstarter process that you went through? I know that
Right.
partially funded through there.
The Kickstarter, we didn't use Kickstarter to make the film, but we used it to raise money to help us release the film. We weren't able to sell the film at Sundance, and we weren't able to sell it even after we won some awards at Berlin. And we had some offers, but they were pretty small offers and very, very limited release. It's a film with no celebrities in it, and people weren't really sure how to market it, so they were a little scared of it. So we thought that we could find an audience for it ourselves. So we partnered up with a couple of institutions, with WME Self-Serve and also with Sundance Artist Services, and we kind of put together our own release model, which has been great, and it's allowed us to reach audiences all over the country, instead of just being able to go into a theater in New York and a theater in Los Angeles and then the DVD comes out. It's allowed us to go to something like 20 cities and 20 theaters across the country, and that's been really great. But the downside to it was that we didn't have a distributor paying for things, so we had to raise the money ourselves, and that's where Kickstarter came in. So we raised a little over $80,000 on Kickstarter, which, if any of you don't know, Kickstarter it's a crowdfunding website where people from all over the world really have the opportunity to support projects, and they don't have to be film projects. There's all sorts of different things that go up on Kickstarter, and our target goal was 80,000, and if we hadn't raised the 80,000, we wouldn't have gotten anything, because that's the way that the site works. But we were able to do it by the skin of our teeth, and and that's what's allowed us to get out there. So it was a lot of work, and it was very nerve-wracking, but the payoff for it has been great. It's also been great because it helped us build a community of support for the film. So a lot of the people who supported the project on Kickstarter have ended up, coming to see the movie in theaters, and they've ended up helping us spread the word about it. I don't know if any of you there maybe contributed anything to our Kickstarter campaign, but it's
I think I did.
not unusual,
I think I contributed $10, I think.
Thank you very much. I hope you think it was worth it.
For sure. I also noticed Alfre Woodard's name on there as a special thing. She's from Tulsa.
Yeah, she was one of my advisors at Sundance, at the Sundance Directing Lab. And, she came and watched some rehearsals, and she gave feedback, and she helped me, working with the actors that we had there. They weren't the same actors who ended up in the film. But she was great. And, I had about I think something like 15 advisors total, including writers and directors and editing advisors and whatnot. You get a lot of feedback.
All right. We have any more questions out here? Hang on, we got one. I'll get the closest one here.
I was wondering if at the end the guy could make it back to his town. How far did he have to go?
Yeah, he. There are a few miles out, definitely, but it's definitely possible. I think it would just take him a few hours, maybe 4 or 5 hours to walk back into town, as long as he doesn't run into a polar bear, and running into a polar bear is not that common. So I think he'd be fine on the walk back in. Once he got back into town, I don't think he'd find a great situation, but.
Did you say you were from Barrow?
Yeah, I grew up not only in Barrow. I grew up in Barrow and Fairbanks and a few other places. So I had a childhood which had elements that were similar to the way that the kids in the movie grew up. But then I also, spent time outside of that community. I even lived in Europe for a couple of years. So I had a different kind of upbringing than they did.
Yeah, the generational contrast was one of the things that really came through to me in the film. Not just the kids, but the grandmother and the relationship between the grandmother and the grandson. You didn't see a whole lot of the other families, and you kind of wondered if some of the dysfunctional elements were, the young boy who I see as the protagonist. He's got a close relationship with his grandmother and his father. Mm-hmm. Is also a rather outstanding person. It's obvious he's going to go to college. Was there anybody else in the group that was going to go to college?
Well, of the characters in the movie, I'd say that he is probably the only one who has that option, and it's fairly accurate to the situation up there. Not many of the kids who graduate from high school in Barrow end up going off to college, and not many of those who do, or a lot of those who do, they go for a year or two, and then they come back home. And it's one of the challenges of life up there. And I think, he has, Cully, the protagonist, he has a strong relationship with his family. He has a strong relationship with his grandmother. And I think that's an important element of why he has been successful in his life so far. And there's also challenges within it. There's a language barrier between him and his grandmother. I mean, she speaks English, but her first language is Inupiaq, and his first language is English. And that's also accurate to the way that that things are in the Arctic right now, or at least in Barrow, where the older generations speak fluent Inupiaq, and that's the way that they speak to each other. And the younger generations speak in English, and they struggle to speak and understand in their own native language. And it creates a bit of a gulf between the generations.
We got another question here.
Yeah, Andrew, thank you for visiting Tulsa. We appreciate it. I had a question. Was there anything ever in Barrow's history that nucleus for the story itself? Did anything like this ever anything like this that might trigger the thought in your mind to make a movie of this nature about it?
It's all autobiographical.
No. Very well spoken. Very well.
No, it's not based on one event. It's not like based on something that happened that exactly this way, but there are definitely elements of it that were drawn from real situations or real events that happened. You know, a lot of the characters are based on real people. The character Vigasuk is based, you know, partly on my grandfather and partly on some uncles of mine. The two lead boys are based on cousins of mine or you know, people that I know or grew up with up there. And then elements of the plot, you know, the details of things like the killing. Some of them are based on acts of violence or killings that happened, not necessarily in Barrow, but happened like when I was in high school. There was somebody who was killed and drugs were involved, and the way that it happened informed the way that I wrote the script, and especially the repercussions. It was the kind of thing where the two boys who did that killing in real life, they could have very easily gotten away with it. The body was never found, and nobody knew what happened. And then a year later, they just broke down and confessed to it because it had been eating away at them. And so aspects of that ended up in the film, especially in, you know, like Ivok's emotional journey. So yeah, it's not directly based, but it has a lot of elements that come from real events.
Yeah. One quick technical, how long were you up there shooting? How long of time did you spend shooting the film?
We had 25 shooting days. We were shooting 25 out of 30 days. And I was up there for a few months prior to that doing pre-production and stayed for a few weeks after that in, you know, wrapping things up. And, you know, all told, we were up there a lot in the year leading up to the shoot, doing casting trips and scouting trips and whatnot. And, you know, it's also my hometown, so I was just sort of there for that reason. So, I mean, we spent a good deal of time up there. The house that Cully and his family live in, that's actually my family's house. That's one of the houses that I grew up in.
Yes, I have a question. I'm a Native American filmmaker myself, trying to make my first feature here in Tulsa. I was wondering, what kind of camera did you use, and how much was your budget?
We used some cameras from Panavision. They have a program where they will loan cameras. You know, it's a grant program, so they'll let you use cameras for free on your first film. I mean, you have to apply to it and get approved and get accepted, but we were lucky enough to do that. So we got the cameras donated by them, which was fantastic.
35 millimeter?
No, that was 35 millimeter, and we altered it to shoot 2-perf, which I don't know if you're familiar with that, but a normal 35 millimeter frame has 4 perforations on the side, and we used 2-perf, meaning that we used half of the frame of film for one image, so we could get 2 images onto one frame of film. So it kind of doubled our film stock, which was a great way to do it. And I'm really happy that we were able to shoot on film too. These days, it's getting more and more unusual to shoot a small independent feature on film because, you know, digital is so much less expensive, or at least is perceived to be that way. And but we were able to shoot on film because digital cameras don't work in the Arctic. It's too cold for them. And the budget was a little under $1 million all told, but we got a lot of that through grants and also through in-kind donations. And things like that. So we didn't have to raise that much in cash. We raised something like $600,000, $650,000 in cash or something like that.
Thank you.
you know, a small budget for a feature film, but it's still a lot of money.
How has Blu-ray helped you as far as getting your film out? I mean, that's had to.
It's helped us somewhat in the release stage, in that there have been some opportunities to do screenings in communities that don't have like a 35 millimeter film projector or don't have a DCP film projector. And it used to be, you know, just a couple of years ago, if you wanted to screen a film in a little place in, you know, rural Alaska or someplace really off the beaten path, they would just ask for a DVD. And screening DVDs it's just not, it's not very fun as a filmmaker. You spend all this time and effort and money trying to make your film look good, and then gets screened on a DVD, and it's just so much of it gets lost. So the Blu-ray has given us an option where we can feel better about screening in some of the smaller out-of-the-way places and still have the film be really accurately represented. So it's been good. I don't know what the Blu-ray release is going to be. You know, we haven't come out on DVD yet. We just came out on VOD and iTunes and stuff like that. And then the DVD and Blu-ray, I guess, will happen in a month or two.
Okay. We'll take a couple more questions.
The environment up there seems so stark. Does that contribute to the abuse of alcohol and drugs?
You know, I don't know. It's a harsh place, and the environment is definitely can be very harsh. It's very cold. It's very dark a lot of the year, and I think the darkness actually maybe contributes more to that than the cold does necessarily. It's also an isolated community. It's hundreds of miles from the nearest town, and there's no roads in or out. You have to take a plane to get there, and so that may contribute. It's not something I think that I can really say with any accuracy as to what causes things. You know, I think there's been a dislocation from aspects of the traditional life which have also contributed to that. You know, the kids that end up doing the best and the kids that end up being most successful at staying away from alcohol and drugs tend to be the ones who are most deeply rooted in the traditions of the community. They're the ones who get into hunting, and you know, they're on whaling teams, and they remain very strongly rooted within the community in that way. And that is increasingly difficult in a world that's so connected and is so you just have this avalanche of pop culture information and distractions, I guess, that come into the village these days. It's even, you know, more so even than when I was growing up. So it's hard to say what, you know, what the reasons are for anything like that, but I think it's a combination of a lot of things.
One last question. Anybody? No? Hey, Andrew, we want to thank you for coming to Tulsa. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad to.
Thank you. Well, wait for your next film.
Great. Yep. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.